I'll be amazed if Anthony Joshua don't lose. I'm expecting him to lose. The only question is when. It could be on Saturday against Alexander Povetkin. I'm not picking Povetkin to win the fight, but I certainly wouldn't be shocked if he did. Why? Because of the attributes that he brings to the table. He's definitely by far the best pressure fighter that Anthony Joshua has ever faced as a professional. And he's one of the top 3 fighters that Joshua's ever faced as a professional. Yes, he's getting up there in age. He may be clean now as opposed to being on whatever substance he was on before. But we saw from the David Price fight, he can still crack. He's still dangerous. Wasn't Anthony Joshua in serious trouble against Dillian Whyte? Wasn't Anthony Joshua totally gassed out and dropped by the midway stage against Vladimir Klitschko? Anthony Joshua is a very good fighter, but he's a vulnerable fighter. Just like Deontay Wilder's a vulnerable fighter. Just like Tyson Fury's a vulnerable fighter. This is why I've been saying for years now that this new era in heavyweight boxing is going to be like musical chairs. There isn't going to be one dominant heavyweight who goes on to rule over the division Klitschko style on a 10-year unbeaten streak. I just don't see that. I know there's a lot of people predicting it's going to be Fury doing that, predicting Joshua's going to do that, predicting Wilder's going to do that. I personally don't see it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I definitely don't see it. Because whenever you have a monolithic heavyweight champion who goes on one of these long unbeaten streaks for many years, that tends to happen when you have a weak division. Like when Vladimir Klitschko, for the majority of his reign, he was ruling over a weak division. Mike Tyson only ruled for a couple years at the top, but he had multiple title defenses during that time, and he was ruling over a relatively weak division. When you get all-time great fighters around at the same time in the same division, you very rarely get a guy who escapes with his unbeaten record intact. Very rarely. Having said that, a lot of the time in heavyweight boxing, great fighters end up losing to the fighter you least expect them to lose to. In heavyweight boxing, it really is a case of expect the unexpected. If you go and look back through heavyweight history, go back to the 60s, Sonny Liston, he was seen as a monolithic heavyweight champion. There were several boxing writers who said that they expected Sonny Liston to be champion for life. The way he was running through contenders prior to winning the title, and the way he destroyed Floyd Patterson in a round, they thought there's nobody who can touch this guy. There's nobody around at the moment who can give this guy any serious trouble. And so when he came up against a contender called Cassius Clay, who later went on to be Muhammad Ali, very few people gave Cassius Clay a chance. He was coming off a win over Henry Cooper, a fight in which he was dropped heavily and hurt badly. And Henry Cooper, R.I.P., and no disrespect, was a fighter who couldn't lace Sonny Liston's boots. Was a fighter who was known for a good left hook, but his left hook was nothing compared to Sonny Liston's left hook. Going into the fight, Muhammad Ali was a 7-1 underdog. There was something like 45 sports writers who were polled to give their predictions before the fight. And about 43 of them picked Sonny Liston to win. And about 2 picked Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay as he was then, to win. So Sonny Liston was not supposed to win that fight. The public perception going into that fight is that this is a routine defense for Sonny Liston. People weren't getting overly excited for Sonny Liston against this guy, this loudmouth. I mean, people wanted Ali to lose at the time. the general public there, who, for insidious reasons at the time, but nobody was looking at it like Ali was a serious threat. No, he was just supposed to be another routine defense for Sonny Liston, and then Liston's reign would continue. Nobody foresaw Liston getting beat that night in the manner that he was, and then this brash young man, Cassius Clay, going on to carve out a Hall of Fame career as one of the greatest heavyweights who ever lived. Nobody foresaw that at that time. Now, looking back on it retrospectively, people say, well, Liston couldn't move and he was slow and, he was a bit older than they claim he was and all this kind of stuff. That's all looking at things retrospectively. Everybody's a genius after the fact. Hindsight is always 20/20. But before the fact, time and time again throughout boxing history, particularly in the heavyweight division, massive upsets happen in fights where the champion, the favorite, is expected to just have a walk in the park. So Ali against Sonny Liston was one of them. Ali, when he fought George Foreman, was another one of them. That's why Ali, one of the reasons why Ali is held in such high regard, because he upset massive odds on multiple occasions. Fights he was not supposed to win, he ended up winning. And he was on the wrong end of one of those type of situations himself. He was the victim of one of them situations against Leon Spinks, a guy who had, 6 or 7 professional fights when he fought Muhammad Ali, and he won. He wasn't supposed to win that fight. You fast forward in the heavyweight division. There were other upsets, like when Michael Spinks fought Larry Holmes, but to be fair, Michael Spinks was a quality fighter at the lower weights, so I can't really say that was as big an upset as some of the others. But certainly Leon Spinks against Muhammad Ali was. And Mike Tyson when he fought Buster Douglas. Mike Tyson had beaten better fighters than Buster Douglas before, and he beat better fighters than Buster Douglas afterwards. Buster Douglas was a 42-1 underdog against Mike Tyson. And again, everyone's a genius after the fact. Oh, Tyson didn't train right. Oh, Tyson was drinking. Oh, Tyson this, Tyson that. See, a lot of people who weren't around during the Tyson era don't realize that when Mike Tyson was fighting, the rumors of him drinking and partying and not living the life were flying around years before he lost to Buster Douglas. This is what people don't understand. When Mike Tyson fought Tony Tucker, he was out partying and drinking before that fight. Did you know that? So it got to the point where when these rumors were flying around that Mike Tyson was partying and this, that, and the other, the journalists and the general public tended to dismiss it. Oh, we've heard it before. Yeah, he's out partying and blah, 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 but he still gets in there and knocks everybody out. 42-1 underdog. That literally means nobody thinks you're going to win. Nobody. If anybody had predicted you to win before the fight, they would have been ridiculed and laughed at. That's how big an underdog Buster Douglas was. Tyson had fought better guys than him. He fought Tony Tucker, who stopped Buster Douglas. He fought Pinkland Thomas. He'd fought guys who were seen, even Michael Spinks, he'd fought guys who were seen as far greater threats than Buster Douglas. If Tyson had lost one of those fights, it wouldn't have been so much of a shock. But Buster Douglas? Nobody expected that. Even when Tyson lost to Holyfield in 1996, November 9th, Holyfield was seen as washed up. Tyson had just blown away Frank Bruno, blown away Bruce Seldon, blown away Peter McNeely and Buster Matthews Jr. Going into the Holyfield fight, Holyfield was coming off a performance which the press said was poor against Bobby Ches. And prior to that, Holyfield had had his license revoked for having a heart problem. He had an actual problem with his heart. I'm not talking about the figurative heart people talk about, which represents courage. I'm talking about the actual heart in his chest. He had a heart problem. And I know people are going to talk about PEDs. Maybe they're right. But nonetheless, he had a heart problem. And they took his license away from him. So he was suspended or banned from boxing for a period because his health wasn't good enough to box. And prior to that heart problem, he got knocked out by Riddick Bowe. The first time he'd ever been knocked out, and he was brutally knocked out in that fight. Virtually out cold. Well, the first right hand that dropped him nearly did knock him out cold, then he got up and he was battered against the ropes and the referee jumped in. So going into the Tyson fight, he was seen as old, a guy who's been in, 3 wars, well, many more than 3 wars, but 3 wars with Bowe. A guy who's had health problems, a guy who's jaded. And here we have Mike Tyson who, he's been in jail, but look what he's done since he's come out of prison. He's destroyed everybody. Nobody's given him a competitive fight. All these guys who have been active like Bruce Seldon and Frank Bruno, he just blew them away. Nobody gave Holyfield a chance. Holyfield was supposed to be food for Mike Tyson in that fight. You think the public were giving Holyfield a chance? I know you get some geniuses now, probably in the comment section. I knew Holyfield was going to win. Yeah, of course you did. And I'm sure you went and put your life savings on it too, right? And you're still eating off that money now. Right? Hindsight is 2020. Everyone's a genius after the fact. Fast forward, look at Lennox Lewis's career. In fact, Lewis lost prior to Tyson losing to Holyfield. Lewis lost to Oliver McCall. Again, Lewis had beaten better fighters than Oliver McCall previously. In fact, Lewis is a classic example of a fighter who defeated all the people he was supposed to defeated all his biggest rivals and his biggest threats other than Riddick Bowe, maybe Michael Moore too. But he defeated all the people he was supposed to defeat, most of his rivals. And he lost to 2 guys who couldn't even lace his boots. Lewis became WBC mandatory challenger when he knocked out Razor Ruddock in 2 rounds. Going into that fight, Razor Ruddock, I think, was the betting favorite. Yeah. Now that was seen as a very dangerous fight for Lewis. He was an underdog, but he wasn't like a massive underdog going into the Razor Ruddock fight. Right? Ruddock was seen as the most dangerous heavyweight in the world after Mike Tyson, because Tyson had just gone to prison. So Ruddock was then seen as the number 1 guy at that point, because he'd given Mike Tyson 2 very tough fights. Nobody had come remotely close to giving Mike Tyson as tougher fights as those other than Buster Douglas. So Ruddock was seen as the man in the division. He was a massive puncher. And Lewis was not seen at that time by the press and the general public as a massive puncher. He was seen as a good athletic boxer. And the people who did pick Lewis were mostly British people, British press. And they were all picking Lewis on points. I don't think any of them, from what I can remember, picked Lewis by knockout. And all of them thought, you know what, if Lewis gets tagged, he'll get taken out. This is a very dangerous fight. What happened? Lewis went out there and blew Razor Ruddock away in 2 rounds. It wasn't even competitive. Razor Ruddock didn't even land a solid shot. He just got blown away. Alright, so Lewis had beaten Razor Ruddock, a dangerous man. He then fought Tony Tucker, Frank Bruno, Phil Jackson, and he hadn't looked amazing in those defenses after the Razor Ruddock fight. But going in against Oliver McCall, he was not expected to lose that fight. That was seen as less dangerous than Bruno, less dangerous than Tony Tucker, certainly less dangerous than Razor Ruddock. Yeah, that's how Oliver McCall was seen. McCall had a load of losses on his record. McCall wasn't even classed as a big puncher by the boxing press at the time. McCall was being openly referred to as a journeyman in the boxing press at the time. Just like Buster Douglas was referred to as a journeyman when he fought Tyson. Nobody thought Oliver McCall was going to win that fight. outside of his own team. And in fact, I'm sure there were people in his team who didn't think he was going to win. You know, there's a funny story that Manny Stewart, who was training Oliver McCall for the Lewis fight, Oliver McCall went to Manny Stewart and said, "How do I beat Lennox Lewis?" And Manny Stewart told him, "You can't. you can't beat this guy. There's no way you can beat him." But obviously Manny Stewart knew there was a way to beat him. He was just trying to press the right buttons with Oliver McCall to get him into the right kind of place to tackle the challenge ahead. But that's what he told him. On paper, a fighter like you is not supposed to beat Lennox Lewis. But it happened anyway. Same with Hasim Rahman. Years later. That was supposed to be a routine defense. Lennox Lewis had beat Evander Holyfield. Lennox Lewis had beat Michael Grant, who was being built up as the next best thing in the heavyweight division. Lennox Lewis had beat David Tua. Lennox Lewis had beat Shannon Briggs. Lennox Lewis had beat Andrew Golota. You know, these were people who were seen as far more dangerous than Hasim Rahman. Believe it or not, Andrew Golota versus Lennox Lewis was seen as virtually a 50-50 fight at the time. Yes, it was. See, people watching the fight now on YouTube, they'll be like, how was that seen as a 50? No, it wasn't. Golota was rubbish. Golota lost all these fights and Golota... Listen, I was around at the time, I'm telling you. Andrew Golota versus Lennox Lewis at the time, that was seen as virtually a 50-50. I think Lewis might have been a marginal favourite, but he certainly wasn't a big favourite. It was seen as a 50-50 fight because Andrew Golota was coming off two fights against Riddick Bowe where he'd really given Riddick Bowe a beating. Even though he lost both those fights via disqualification, he'd beaten the crap out of Riddick Bowe in those fights. And he impressed so many people with his ability, his chin, his punching power, his speed, his mobility, etc. against Riddick Bowe. It's just mentally he was a bit cuckoo. Going into the Lewis fight, people were expecting Andrew Golota to give Lewis all he could handle and then some, and very conceivably win the fight. But Lewis blew him away in a round. So I'm labouring the point here, but the point I'm making is when Lewis was going into 50-50s, fights that seemed dangerous, he won those fights. But when he took on guys who he's not supposed to beat, when he took on guys who he's supposed to beat easily and blow away, he lost a couple of those fights. And I could go on with the heavyweight division, alright, go into the Klitschko era and whatnot. I mean, even Riddick Bowe, when he fought Evander Holyfield in a rematch, Holyfield was a big underdog. He'd come off a layoff, he'd fought Alex Stewart, he'd come back. Nobody thought he was going to beat Riddick Bowe in a rematch. Everybody thought Holyfield was going to get stopped in the second fight. But how it all relates to today and Anthony Joshua is people are looking at Alexander Povetkin like this is just a foregone conclusion. Now, Alexander Povetkin might not be the guy to defeat Anthony Joshua, but I'm so sure that one of these champions, Joshua, Wilder, or maybe all of them, even Tyson Fury, I'm so sure that one or maybe all of these guys are going to lose to people during their championship reigns. They're going to lose to people who they're not supposed to lose to. I'm very sure of this. Everyone's thinking the only people that can threaten Joshua are Wilder and Fury, and that's it. Nobody else has a hope in hell of beating him. I don't believe that. And in fact, if you go back to my old videos, when Klitschko was still reigning supreme, I think even prior to him fighting Kubrat Pulev, around the time he was fighting people like Mariusz Wach, I said in numerous videos at the time that Klitschko is not going to beat all these young heavyweights. One of them is going to beat him. I didn't know which one, but all I knew is that one of these guys is definitely going to beat Klitschko. At least one of them is going to beat him. If he fights all these young contenders coming up, the Wilders, the, Joshua's coming up, the, Povetkin, the Pulev, and all these guys, somebody is going to beat him. He's not going to be able to beat all of them. Why did I know this? Because the majority of the Klitschko era contained extremely weak contenders. People like Calvin Brock. Who's that southpaw called? Gomez. Chris Bird. No disrespect, but Chris Bird was a little guy with no power. Adamek. These were the guys who were around during the Klitschko era that Vitaly and Vladimir were fighting, and it's not their fault that it was a weak era, but a weak era it was nonetheless, and it was characterized by small heavyweights. Most of them, or many of them, were fat, right? Short, fat heavyweights. Sam Peter, Lamont Brewster, short, chubby plodders who would come forward and get jab, grabbed all night. The new breed that were coming up were athletic, was 6'6". They weren't lumbering lumps of wood like a Marius Wack, who's a big guy, but ridiculously slow. There's no athleticism there. The new guys coming up, the Joshuas, the Wilders, and all this new breed, they wouldn't be so easy to take on in the ring because of the fact that they had the same physical attributes as Klitschko. So I knew somebody was going to beat Klitschko. I didn't pick Fury specifically, but I knew one of these young guys was going to get him. 100%, and I was saying it in my videos for a long time during that era. But at the time, nobody thought Klitschko was going to lose. I would look in the comment section of my videos when I was saying all this stuff, and people were saying, nah, Hatman, you're talking rubbish. Nobody's going to beat Klitschko. He's going to retire undefeated from now on. So many people in so many videos in the comment section over and over again were saying, you're wrong. Klitschko is going to remain undefeated until the end of his career. And obviously he wasn't undefeated, previously he'd lost fights, but what they were talking about is during this current reign, he was going to remain undefeated and then retire undefeated. It's what so many people were saying. But I knew that that was not going to happen because of the fact that the new crop of heavyweights coming through was so much more talented and so much more physically gifted in terms of their size and athleticism and strength and all this kind of business than the previous crop. And so right now we've got contenders who are also big guys. You got experienced people like Povetkin out there who's been fighting big guys his whole career. You got Jarrell Miller out there. You've obviously got the obvious dangers for Joshua in Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. But you got Adam Kownacki as well out there. You got Dylan White, who could cause an upset or two. You got Efe Ajagba coming up. You got Andy Ruiz. There are so many fighters, and, I've just named quite a few fat heavyweights, ironically. But there are so many fighters out there who are hungry, who are strong, and who are dangerous that I can't see Joshua going on some long 10-year unbeaten reign. I just can't see it. I think someone's going to get him. I think someone's going to get Wilder. I mean, didn't Ortiz nearly get Wilder? An old man? Didn't White almost get Joshua? And Klitschko, another old man, almost get Joshua? Wasn't Tyson Fury flattened by a cruiserweight in Steve Cunningham and flattened by Nevin Pikage, a guy who had about 4 KOs in 20 fights? So, I'm not going to be so quick to dismiss Alexander Povetkin's chances on the weekend. I'm not picking him to win, but I certainly wouldn't be shocked if he did, given his experience, given his style. given the fact that he still does have very good punching power, given his boxing brain, I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss it. That's all I'm saying. I know a lot of people are quick, and I think it's about 80%. I think more than 80%. I think 88%. Let me just double check. I did a poll the other day on my YouTube channel. It's, 88% of people on my YouTube channel have picked Anthony Joshua to defeat Alexander Povetkin. 88%. With 11% picking Povetkin to win and 1% predicting a draw. So it shows you, in the eyes of the public, Anthony Joshua is a massive favorite to win this fight, and it's seen by most people as a walk in the park for Anthony Joshua. Now, if it turns out to be a walk in the park, great. But there will come a point when Joshua faces someone who's supposed to be a walk in the park, and he gets in there and ends up losing. Yeah, I'll be very surprised if that don't happen. Very surprised. I'm anticipating it. I'm expecting it. I'm expecting this heavyweight era to be very similar to the 1990s, where there's loads of frills and spills and upsets and, like a soap opera. So anyway, let me know how you guys feel in the comment section below. It's Hatman, I'm out.